Hey everyone, it's Darren. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about surveys. These are specifically customer and employee surveys. The surveys like you get at anything from the bottom of your receipt at the fast food place or the grocery store to the annual employee engagement surveys that you get in a big corporation. Anything like that, we're going to be talking about. Uh, they're really useful if you design them well, if you build them properly, if you interpret the results correctly, they can do amazing things. If you design them poorly, you will send out the survey and either get nothing back, or worse yet, you'll get the data back and you'll look at it and say, why didn't I ask this? And you won't be able to use the data until you send out another whole survey to include that part that you missed. So I'm going to try to tell you how to avoid some of those problems. We're also going to talk about some of the other common pitfalls with surveys. Used properly, they can help you to spot problems. They can help you to spot opportunities. They can give you insight into what's going on from your customers or your employees that management will never see on their own because they're just not there. They're not down working in the trenches. They're not the one trying to find products on your store shelves that they can't find them. Uh, so surveys can do a lot of good used properly, and that's the key is we have to use them properly. Uh, Before we get started, though, a couple of limitations on what we're talking about today. We're talking specifically about surveys for customers and employees. We're not talking about public opinion polling. Public opinion polling is where you go out and you talk to huge numbers of people and you ask them, complete global import sorts of questions like, do you prefer Coke or Pepsi? Do brownies need to have a good rich chocolate frosting or just powdered sugar on them? The really critical stuff like that. We're not going to talk about that. The reason is that there's a lot of extra requirements for those surveys. You have to make sure your sample size is much bigger. You have to watch for biases. You have to watch for biases in the questions and the answers in the survey groups. And we're just not going to get into that in this video. I may do a video in the future where we talk about what those requirements are. Uh, so this first part is, who are you going to be surveying? Uh, there's two main groups. Your first group of people you might survey is your employees. Uh, these are people that you would love to think would think, well, I have a great idea. I'm going to go tell my manager about it. And it work its way up through the chain and everything would work perfectly. It doesn't. We know it doesn't. So who are you surveying among your employees, though? Are you surveying all of them? Big corporate-wide survey. A lot of large and medium-sized companies will do an annual survey of their employees. Sometimes it's employee satisfaction survey. Sometimes it's employee engagement survey. The idea is the same. You just try to get a feel for what's going on and hopefully what you can maybe improve as a company or improve life for the employees. We'll get to their goals later. Maybe you only serve an individual department. You're trying to find out, okay, what does my customer service department need? That it's stuff that's not applicable to anybody else, but customer service might need something special. So what do we give for customer service? You might also do contact surveys with employees. These are real common surveys. It's things like after you open a ticket with the help desk or with payroll or whoever, the ticket gets resolved. As soon as the ticket closes out, you get a invitation in the email says, "Hey, do this quick 5-question survey to tell us how about your service." Um, One of the critical things whenever you're working with employee surveys is that you have to make sure that you tell the employee that this is in fact a part of the job. Uh, Whether it's optional or mandatory is up to you to design, but you need to make sure they know, this doesn't have to be done at home. You can do this in the office. We encourage you to do this in the office. You also need to let them know, is it confidential or not? And if you tell them it's confidential, make sure it's really actually confidential. I've seen people cheat, and we'll talk about that. For customers, you have two real groups of customers that you're going to be working with. And it depends on what your business is and how you're working as a customer. Uh, this also applies a little bit to suppliers, but it's more customers. So the first type of customer, You go out to a fast food place, you order your food, you get your receipt, you look down at the bottom of your receipt and it says, oh, call this number or go to this web page or click this QR code or whatever to do this short survey and be entered into a drawing for free lunch. Okay. Those are contact surveys, which are pretty much almost exactly the same thing as the surveys that you'd have like after a help desk ticket. Uh, they're short, they're simple. They can give you a lot of information about what's going on store by store, even between day and night shifts. The other kind of customer survey that you'd have is mostly for a different kind of business. It's where you have extensive, ongoing relationships with your customers. Now, I'm not talking about like a car salesman who might work with a customer for a month before they get a car and never talk to them again. I'm talking more about, say, like a computer cabling company that's coming out and wiring store after store after store after store, office after office. Uh, these are customers that they've got your personal cell phone number programmed on their cell phone, and you're not going to be upset if they call you at 10 o'clock at night because you're working on some big project together. These are people that are really more like part of the team, or you're part of their team, or both. uh, they can be treated really very much like your employees for purposes of surveys. You can do longer surveys with them, not just the real short contact surveys. And you can get sort of a different kind of information. You can get a lot more information. You're also able to typically follow up with them because a lot of your customers will have really good ideas on how you can improve your business and serve them better. Okay, so now let's talk about the types of surveys that you can do, because there's quite a few different kinds. Again, we're not going to talk about public polling type here. So the types of surveys we're going to talk about, there's the periodic survey. It's often done annually. These are usually employee surveys, or they can be surveys with those regular, ongoing, long-term relationship type customers. Employee engagement surveys, employee satisfaction surveys, that sort of thing. Um, when you're designing these, there is a tendency sometimes to make them long and sometimes make them very long. And you really need to avoid doing that. Uh, they can get too long really quick. You want to keep the length down so they can do it in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If you're hitting 20, you're really getting way too long. If you really do have that many questions to ask, and you might, that's when you start to break things up. Break it up into a semi-annual or a quarterly survey, and do okay, we're going to ask benefit questions on this one. We're going to ask management interaction questions on this survey, and just break things apart a little bit. Just try to get that distance down. As surveys get longer and longer and longer, the quality of your answers will decrease. So I said 5 minutes is pretty much always safe for this kind of survey. 10, usually you're okay. 20, you're losing people. The other thing you risk is that people just won't finish it. Uh, so with these questions, with these periodic surveys, things you want to keep in mind, usually one thing that you really want to know is how have we improved, hopefully improved, since the last survey. You're trying to find out what employee engagement looks like this year compared to what employee engagement looked like last year. Uh, so you want to keep the questions fairly consistent. The exception to that is if you find a big hole, you might need to change your questions. Uh, for example, if you have a survey and you think your benefit package is great and you put a question on expecting, an easy 5 out of 5 on it for, what do you think of your medical insurance? And it comes back 2. It's like, what? I've got no clue what this is about. Why is it a 2? Um, that means that on your next survey, if not sooner, you need to try to figure out what's going on and maybe throw out another couple of questions to dig a little bit deeper into what's going on. Uh, Honestly, if you thought you were going to get a 5 on something, then you got a 2, you probably don't want to wait till the next annual survey either. You might need to do a quick, short, focused survey on that, or literally walk around and start asking people questions and try to get an idea of what's going on. Uh, another kind of survey that you're going to have pretty routinely is product release and pre-release surveys. These are typically to customers, but they're also to, and I hate the term, internal customers. So you ask people, hey, what services do you want us to provide? What are we not providing you with today that you would like us to provide? As an example, nonprofit that I volunteer with, we're looking at some drywallers, and we're just thinking, it'd be great if they do painting. Everyone after they get drywall work done needs it painted. So, if they were surveying us and would say, what services can we provide? Well, paint. Simple, right? I don't know if they've ever thought of it. Uh, so that's kind of the where we might want to steer our products. Another way to look at it is just after release. So we release a new version of software and we send out surveys to customers a couple weeks later. Hey, how did this go for you? Are people liking it? Are people not liking it? What parts were confusing? Where did you have problems? What are your staff saying about it as they're using this software? And that can really guide you first for finding bugs you hadn't already fixed. Typically, those would be the more minor ones, but also for improving your releases in the future. And that's, like I said, it's not only software, it can be almost anything. We all have releases that the drywall contractor I mentioned, if they start painting, that's a release. If you completely rebuild your menu at a store, at a restaurant, you went from one menu, you created a brand new menu. That's a release. So that would be a release survey. Okay, the next kind of survey we're going to talk about is the contact survey. Contact surveys are very short surveys. It's the survey that you get at the bottom of your receipt when you buy groceries, or at the bottom of your check at the restaurant. It's the survey when you open a help desk ticket or a ticket with payroll because your paycheck wasn't right. And when the ticket's closed, you get an automated email at work that says, "Hey, tell us how we're doing." It's quick 5 questions. Contact surveys are a little bit different from these other surveys. Contact surveys are usually not anonymous, whereas the other surveys are anonymous. And that's one of the big differences. Another difference is that contact surveys tend to be very short. 5 questions is pretty much about what you want to stick to. You could maybe do six. You don't want somebody doing 5 minutes because they're not going to do it. Uh, you want people to be able to go in, go through these quick. You might have to offer some kind of a reward for it. Uh, so with employees, for example, you're typically looking at a ticket-based system. So when they open a ticket to the IT help desk or to payroll or to HR or something, anytime that you're sending something out to another department that says, help, I need help with this, and they provide some service and come back to you. Um, so with employees, what are you going to know? Well, it's not confidential. So you're going to get the date and time the ticket was open. You're going to get the date and time the ticket was closed. You're going to get who the initial contact person was, most likely. You're going to get the name of the person who resolved the issue. You're going to know the category of the issue. Was it a payroll issue? Was it it was an IT issue? And you can actually sometimes have a lot of detail. You may know not only it was an IT issue, but it was the user forgot the password, or we had a software bug and it took us a week to figure out how to fix this problem. Uh, so basically try to capture everything, and you're going to have that ticket number, which will then, if you need to, let you go back and look in the actual ticket. You won't do that often, but sometimes you'll want to. Let's say it's customer data, so a customer contact survey. Um, well, if you're in a restaurant or retail, you certainly know the date and time that the person purchased was there, whether they purchased it or ate there. You know the date and time the survey was taken, so you know how long it was between those. You're gonna know store number, restaurant number, store number, location, whatever. If it's a restaurant, you'll know dine-in, carry-out, delivery. If it's regular retail, you'll know if they came in person or ordered it for delivery. For retail, you'll know if it was a traditional cashier or self-checkout. You'll probably have a receipt number, so you can even go in and see, here's the stuff the person actually had on their receipt. Here's the stuff the person actually ate that day. You won't necessarily go into that detail all the time, but it's nice to have it. Uh, and occasionally you might actually need it. Um, so the final kind of survey is the beta test survey. Uh, the beta test survey is kind of a special creature. Beta testers are actual users of this thing, whatever it is. Beta testers are people who will receive the product and they'll actually use it on real data. So, if you're a call center and you use this database to help, you'll actually use the database while you're taking live calls. Whatever it is, you're using actual production stuff, and they'll release it to a small number of people, a lot more than alpha testers, but nowhere's near the whole user population. So when they release it to the beta testers, the thing that the people creating the product, whether it's software or hardware, whatever, they need constant feedback. So the beta test surveys are, did you try this? Did you try this? Did you try this? How did this work? How did this work? How did this work? And lots of spaces to type comments. And that's because they need as much feedback as they can get. Beta test surveys are almost never anonymous. They can come out a lot, depending on how the product development's going. You might see a new beta test survey every week or two. Developers will often just manage this themselves. Uh, Typically, the developers will know what they need to be looking for. Yeah, if you're designing a new package for uh, grocery store produce, uh, you want to know from people at the store, okay, so we shipped it out of the warehouse. How did it arrive? Maybe what do some of the customers think? Are you getting problems from customers with it? So that's the beta test survey, and those are typically very dynamic. So we're not going to worry too much about those here. I'm going to focus more on the other kinds. Basic survey fundamentals here, uh, kind of global rules that you always want to follow. Um, Openness is completely key here to having good, honest responses. Tell people why you're doing the survey. Even if you think it's obvious, tell people why you're doing the survey. What are you hoping to find from it? What are you hoping to do with it? Um, if it's an employee survey, again, make sure that they know that this is a work-related thing. Make sure they know if it's optional or mandatory. Make sure that they know it's expected that they'll do this on work time and they don't have to do this on their own personal time. And make sure they have the resources to do it. If you want your employees to do a survey on a computer and you are a company which doesn't have everyone sitting at computers all day, they might not have a computer to do it. So you might have to provide some other means. Let people know what you're going to do with the results. Are you going to have the results compiled and be reviewed by key management? If you're doing store surveys with employees, are they going to go back to that store in consolidated form that is not individually trackable back to the individual employee, for example? Also, tell them who they should contact with any questions. Uh, don't put a blank in the survey. That says, if you have any other questions, put them here because you won't want to deal with that. Uh, Give them an email or a contact. When you send out the survey that says, if you have any questions, email this person. So is the survey anonymous? That's a common problem with surveys. Uh, if it's anonymous, make sure it's actually anonymous. Make sure that management cannot get individual identifiable data out of it. Uh, and also let people know why it's anonymous. Make sure everyone knows how it's anonymous. Uh, if it's not anonymous, that's fine. Let people know that this data is not anonymous. If identifiable information will only be available to HR, for example, tell people. Uh, if you tell people that it's anonymous and it's not, they'll figure it out and they will never trust you with the survey again. It's not worth it. It's not worth losing that credibility. And I've seen people do this. I've seen a company that I worked with. where surveys were done on paper. Not everyone was that good with computers. Uh, so there were these printed surveys made up, and at the bottom was this little random code. If you've seen like government documents, a lot of times there's like this little like 10-digit code at the bottom. Usually it's like a date and a time and a number or whatever at the bottom that tracks that form number. And there's a little code at the bottom of each one. And the person running the survey had a spreadsheet with this list of codes and the names. And they went around and handed out these forms to everybody, make sure everyone got the one that was attached to them because they lined them up so they were in order by desk so they could just walk through and hand them out. And it didn't look like they were paying attention to which form went to who, but they were all identifiable forms. So in this case, the person didn't actually do anything bad with it, also, didn't get anything useful out of it. If people had figured out that he was doing it, there would have been a serious loss of respect and a serious loss of trust. It just isn't worth it. If if you need that identifiable information, just tell people it's not anonymous and who will have access. There are potential cases where you legally can't have anonymous surveys. There are some cases where you legally must have anonymous surveys. When you start to get into medical data, when you get into financial data and things, sometimes it has to be anonymous, sometimes it legally can't be, and tell people about that. Uh, Now, you also have cases where you might want to provide, you know, we're doing a survey for product ideas, and we're going to give $5,000 to the employee with the best product idea. That's great. Do that. Absolutely do that. But make sure they know this survey is not anonymous and make sure this is a separate survey. Over here, you have your employee engagement survey. And over here, you have your completely separate, done on a different month survey that we're doing $5,000 to the top product idea. So that they aren't linked, they're not tied together at all. And everyone knows we know these ones. Um, So the best reason for making it anonymous, though, is you're going to get the honest answers. And what's the point of doing a survey if you're not getting anonymous answers? Uh, People realize that if it's truly anonymous, that means that they can give an honest answer, and management will not be able to retaliate against them for it. So that's why you want it anonymous whenever you can. So how do you make it anonymous? Well, ideally, you don't ask questions at the bottom like, if you have any questions or would like a response, please fill in this part with your name, email, phone number. That's not anonymous. You also don't do at the bottom, enter your email address to be entered into a drawing to win, whatever, because that's not anonymous either, unless that's being managed by an outside company. And you can actually do the first part for questions if it's managed by an outside company and it's managed in a way that the outside company will forward those to you completely independent of your other survey results. And we'll get to how to design that later. Okay, so now we've covered the types of surveys. Now we're going to talk about the survey design. So, right at the very top of the survey, doesn't matter if you're doing this on paper, on a computer, on a web page, whatever, right up at the very top, say why you're doing the survey. Are you doing the survey because you're trying to improve the employee benefit package next year? Are you doing the survey because you're trying to improve employee engagement? Are you doing the survey because you want to improve the profitability of the company? What is the reason for the survey? Um, Make it simple, make it very brief, but make sure it's very clear why you're doing this. What makes it worth it to me to spend 5, 10 minutes filling out this survey? Why should I care? Again, if it's an employee survey, make sure you say right at the very top, this is a work-related function. You're expected to do this on work-related time. Your manager has been told to give you time to do this. Uh, if it's more than a contact survey, if it's more than that like 5 minute, 5 question survey, tell people how long you expect it to take. Is it going to take them 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes? We'll talk about testing the survey a little later, but your test group needs to time the survey as they go through it and they'll come up with an average time, and they'll give you something to sort of go from. Uh, Again, is it required or is it optional? Are there any incentives? Uh, Commonly, companies will do things like if you complete the survey, you'll be entered into a drawing for one of 20 Amazon gift cards or something. Um, you if you're doing that with an anonymous survey, you have to make sure that you manage that and explain how that's anonymous. But we can do that. That's not that hard to manage. When, if at all, will I hear the results back? If I'm taking a survey, you're going to tell me what the results are. Uh, Sometimes companies do. Usually they don't, which I think is a mistake. Uh, but let people know if they're going to hear the results back and how and when, if you know. Will I get results back from the survey in 2 weeks or is it going to be 3 months? It kind of depends. And we'll get into that in a future video on actually processing these results. Okay, so when you're doing a survey, you might need to also think about how to break up your staff into groups. Um, and this is more staff here than in-depth customer. Uh, but staff, if it's a small business, if you've got 10 employees, don't bother with the groups. In fact, 10 employees is really hard to survey. Let's say you're a large business. You might have 50 offices or 50,000 offices, and you might want to break people up so you know which offices are out there because you may find this office has great management interactions and this office has horrible management interactions. So you'll want to know. You might break things down geographically. Here's this state by state or location. Um, Anytime you're breaking stuff down, though, you do have to be careful. For example, let's say we break stuff down geographically, and now we could just break it down for, say, Michigan. In Michigan, we have 500 employees. Great. So Michigan's a perfectly good group to use. But we have a bunch of individual locations in Michigan. So we have Detroit, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, and half dozen little ones out there. Um, okay, well, Detroit is 200 people, Grand Rapids is 100, Ann Arbor is 100. But then we go out into these other offices that are three, four, or five people each. Um, well, Detroit, Ann Arbor, and Grand Rapids, that's enough people that I can't individually identify anybody from the results. This office with two people in it, if I say, Mackinac City office, which has two employees and only one of them filled out a survey up there, and I get critical comments from the Mackinac City office, I know who it is. And because of that, that makes it not anonymous. So you might need to, for smaller sites, do Detroit, Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, other Michigan sites, because other Michigan sites is 100 people. So something to consider. Um, Again, you can break down almost any way geographically. You can break it down by department. You can break it down by groups of department. You can break it down by title. Um, you can also do multiple breakdowns. But again, you have to be careful here. I'll give you a personal example. So my last job, we had we had like 20,000 employees or whatever. Had a lot of employees company wide. Michigan had 200, give or take, depending on the exact time. 200 is plenty to be anonymous. Uh, the IT department had a couple hundred people, was plenty to be anonymous. But if we'd asked for state and department, uh, towards the end, I was the only IT person in Michigan. So that meant that if we asked for state and department, that meant it was individually identifiable. Uh, there are ways of managing this. External companies can handle this as long as you tell them to make sure they handle it, so that they would only give you the Michigan breakdown or only give you the IT breakdown, and they would not give you a breakdown of Michigan and IT. They might give you Michigan and customer service, Michigan and other departments, but they won't give you any grouping that takes it down to, say, less than 50. And you can specify that. You can get outside companies to do that for you. And If you're a big company, that's usually the easiest thing to do is to have them do that initial processing for you. It's the safest thing to do if you want to ensure anonymity. We finally made it past the header of our survey. So for the questions, you have a few options. Almost everything you have on your survey, you want to be multiple choice. Make it on a scale of 1 to 5, a scale of 1 to 10, whatever you want. Um, 1 to 5 usually works a little better, in my opinion. 1 to 10, people start to get kind of fuzzy on, well, what's a seven and what's an eight. Um, Whereas 1 to 5, especially if you say, 3 is met expectations, 4 was beat expectations, 5 was, wow, I can't believe they went this far to help me out. Multiple choice is going to make your life easier analyzing the data. Uh, you may see some fill in the blank short answer questions. Those are really hard to actually analyze if you have a large amount of data. If you think of it this way, uh, if you have, let's say you have typically 20% of your employees answer a survey, and of those, you might have 10% will fill in blanks or something, 10, 20%, whatever. Um, if you have 100 employees, that's not that big a deal. You'll only get a few comments. What if you have 50,000 employees and you have this happening? Now you might get 1,000 long, typed, badly spelled, horrible grammar comments sent into you. Uh, you have to sort of somehow sort through and figure out what's going on. Um, and it's just overwhelming. And a lot of times it's not worth it. If you're not actually going to read them, if you're not actually going to try to figure out what's going on with it, just don't do it. Don't include it. You can always add a contact line. You can always add an email address at the bottom that says if you have any other comments that you'd like to offer, uh, send to this email address, and then just have somebody review them that way. Less people will do it casually, but you'll get the serious questions and the serious comments that way. So what about the actual questions themselves? Well, I'm not going to tell you about those. And the reason is I am a data expert, really good with IT stuff. I've got a lot of other areas I know. I don't know your business. And because of that, I can't tell you what the right questions are. I'm not an HR person. I can't tell you what to ask to improve benefit systems. I'm not a payroll person. I can't tell you what questions to ask to improve the payroll system. Um, so you guys are the experts. You're all of you out there watching this video. You're the ones that understand what you need to be asking. What are you looking for? So once you've kind of figured out what you're trying to ask, you want to actually test your survey. And that's an important step that a lot of people miss. Before you send out a survey to 100,000 employees, you want to make sure the survey actually makes sense and actually gets you something that you can actually handle when it comes back. Uh, so you want to just make up a mock survey with your questions on it, and even if you're just like type up the survey in Word and hand it to somebody, it's going to go on the computer later, we know, but just hand it to them on paper. No, that's fine, and ask people who are similar to the people who will actually be taking this to go through the survey. And it's important to be people similar to who will take it. If it's an employee survey for the whole company, get it to a variety of people and ask them to complete it, a time how long it takes to complete it, and then also give you feedback on the survey itself. Like if they say, I don't know what you mean on question number 3, that means question number 3 needs to be rewritten. If they come back and say, well, I don't think I'd really be comfortable answering this question because I'm afraid my boss would come back and fire me, that means you haven't covered the anonymity part well enough in the header. So that's the kind of thing you're looking for. You're probably going to get some good spread in the amount of time taken as well. Some people might get it done in 5 minutes, some people might get it done in 10. When you give an estimated time, go towards the high end. If people are like between 5 and 10 minutes typically, and when you're telling people how long you expect it to take, tell them, this may take you about 10 minutes to complete the survey, and make sure that the management knows your staff are going to be spending maybe 10 minutes doing this. Also, on your prototype survey, take a look at if you have any short answer or additional comments type questions. Uh, so if you send out to 20 testers and five of them put in like two sentences of stuff, and your survey is really going out to 20,000 people, are you going to be able to actually read and do something with 5,000 written survey responses? Uh, Probably not. That's just too many. You don't want that. You probably can't do anything with that many. So that may be the time that you need to look at tweaking those kinds of questions too. And maybe a short answer sort of survey question could be changed into two or three multiple choice and get you the same thing, but make it easier to process your data. Uh, Processing the data with multiple choice is really easy. Processing it with short answer is you got to read the things one by one and try to figure out what they mean. Okay, so the next question we have is who's actually going to run the survey? And this partly depends on the company and who you're surveying. Contact surveys are often done in-house, or you get somebody like SurveyMonkey to do it. Contact surveys, remember, aren't anonymous. Uh, the reason for having somebody outside do it is just because it's easier if you don't have an IT department that wants to commit the time to doing a survey like that and managing an ongoing survey. Uh, the other reason for doing it in-house is it can be a little cheaper if you've got the people around to do it. Remember, labor's not free. So even if you have the people who know how to do it, who have the ability to do it, you have the equipment to do it, you may not have the time to do it. So sometimes you want to run it out of house. Uh, so the most popular company right now that I know of doing that is a company called SurveyMonkey. You've probably taken surveys from SurveyMonkey. They're very easy to create the surveys out there. They can provide you with a lot of data. They're fairly cheap. Everyone's used to doing stuff with SurveyMonkey. If you get an email from SurveyMonkey, you're not going to be afraid to click on the link for it because everybody knows them. Uh, SurveyMonkey has one huge problem, in my opinion, and that is that they do not currently have any mechanism to tell you if the survey is anonymous or not. Um, the survey creator can write that it's anonymous and not make it anonymous. The survey creator can pick whether it's anonymous or not, but SurveyMonkey does not report that to the people taking the survey. SurveyMonkey, if you're listening, fix that. There needs to be a way for people taking the survey to tell. Uh, there are a bunch of other companies out there. SurveyMonkey does not do processing. If you're getting a lot of data in, if you want some initial processing done on it, other outside survey companies can do that, and they can get you nice formatted reports and everything. They can help to analyze the data. If you're running a survey that is outside your company's area of specialization, for example, if you are going to be doing a employee engagement survey, and yeah, you've got your HR people, but they're busy. They don't have a massive amount of time, and they've never done a huge, in-depth employee engagement survey. So maybe you hire somebody who actually specializes in that to run that survey for you. And they run the survey and they process the data, and then they've got the people who can sit down with you and go through the results with you. They'll also give you partially processed data, so they will process it into chunks that you can work with uh, from the massive piles of data. And I've seen these surveys go over 100 questions, and they group them and categorize them and tell you, well, here's where you are relative to all of the other thousands of customers that we've asked these questions, which tells you, you're doing well, you're doing badly. Sometimes even break it down like comparable industries, so they can be worthwhile. Okay, so now you've got all the perfect questions. You've figured out who's sending it out. You've prototyped it. All of your testers love the survey. The data they've come back with, you've scanned over it. It looks like this is perfect data. It's exactly what you were looking for to advance whatever goal you're trying to do with this survey. Great. Now, how do I send it out? Well, it depends. If you're sending it out with an outside company, like SurveyMonkey or whoever, they're probably taking care of it. You probably give them an email address list, and they send it out to everybody, and they manage it for you. You don't have to think about it. Uh, what about cases where you're doing it internally? Well, again, you may just send out a group email, and that works. If people don't all have computers, and those of us who have spent years sitting in an office have to remember that not every company, everyone sits there with a computer all day. You might need to consider providing a computer sort of in a remote private location and let people go fill it out there, or do it on paper. Just give everybody a piece of paper. Um, if you're doing it on paper, make sure you know how you're going to actually get that stuff typed in. Make sure that you know not only how it's getting typed in, but make sure you know that you trust who's doing it. There's the ability for bias. If somebody says, my manager's absolutely terrible, and you tell them, okay, so fill out this piece of paper and give it to your manager has to type it in, that's not going to work real well. So have a plan. They should go to somebody that most people aren't really interacting with. That way you're not running into that sort of a problem. Uh, Make sure you tell people this is how long you have to complete it. Not only, this is going to take you 10 minutes, but please complete this within the next 2 weeks. Uh, and then at 2 weeks, that's where your cutoff is, or maybe you go a couple days after. You have your cutoff, and at that cutoff, anything after that's not going to get processed. So now it's all sent out, and your employees and their customers, they've been filling this thing out. The contact survey, they're going to be filling out continuously. Uh, Other surveys, it's going to be a one-time thing or an annual thing. Uh, Now you've got all this data coming back in, and you're getting buried in all this data, and you have to process all this data. And what do you do with it? Well, that's for another video because we've already been talking for a long time here, and I'm sure that you're ready for a break. So we'll have future videos that actually cover what to do with contact surveys, what to do with larger annual surveys, how to process that, how to share that, and how to make sense of some of the data. So that there's going to be a bunch of videos in the future on that. Be sure to subscribe so you can see when those come out and hit notify. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Hopefully you've learned something from the video. That's why I do these, is so that people can learn to use their data better. If you did learn anything, please hit the like button. Also, again, subscribe and hit notify so you can see when future videos come out. Yeah, also have a Patreon channel. You could really help out a lot on my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/data analysis excellence. It'd be great if you could help out the page that way. And that's all I have for you today. Look forward to seeing you again. Thanks for stopping by.